Tonight, I want to share a tale that has deeply etched itself into my memory. In this skyscraper, if anyone can play Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 3 perfectly within 6 months, I will marry him. The entire hall gasped in stunned silence. No one believed that the night shift cleaner, mopping the floors, had any connection to such a declaration. But 6 months later, on a stage ablaze with lights, everyone held their breath, finally desperate to know the outcome. You have to witness it firsthand. In this building, if anyone can play Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 3 perfectly within 6 months, I will marry him. This statement resonated like a bolt of lightning through the main lobby of an iconic skyscraper in the heart of Midtown Manhattan. It was midday, lunch break for hundreds of office workers. They were milling about with their lunchboxes or coffee cups from Starbucks, suddenly freezing in their tracks as they passed a luxurious grand piano. Some couldn't resist pulling out their phones to record. Others whispered chuckles, thinking that the young female CEO, merely 29 yet managing billions of dollars, was being overly dramatic. Ava Sterling, in a crisp white silk blouse, her long black hair cascading over her shoulders, stood poised before a gleaming black Yamaha CF grand piano. Her voice was clear and sharp, her gaze sweeping across a multitude of astonished faces. In that moment, no one dared to respond, for this was no game, but a public commitment delivered with absolute seriousness. Ava was not one for impulsive or thoughtless actions. She had been raised in a rigorous environment since childhood. Piano, much like complex algorithms, was a fundamental part of the order and discipline in her life. She knew intimately how challenging Rachmaninoff's third concerto was. Even international competition champions would not readily claim perfection. The lobby instantly buzzed with murmurs. Investors in sharp suits began to whisper, "Is this a public talent acquisition, or is there some deeper motive?" Some scions from elite families in high society were even more eager, sensing this was a golden opportunity to showcase their talent and, incidentally, buy into this rapidly expanding unicorn tech company. Some were already calculating the 6-month time frame in their minds, pondering which renowned professor to enlist for intensive tutoring, or simply paying someone to play and record it. However, in a hidden corner, a man in a faded blue uniform, a mop slung over his shoulder, simply bowed his head in silence, gently dipping the mop into a bucket of water, wringing it out, then slowly pushing it across the polished floor. Kai Lim, 30 years old, a cleaner and security guard. His existence, to the elite in this building, was much like a fire extinguisher in the corner. Essential, but truly noticed by no one. When Kai heard those words, his heart seemed to stir. He of course knew Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 3. That was the stage he had dreamt of countless nights in his youth, when he studied music at a reputable art school in Singapore. He had once passed the entrance exam for the prestigious Yong Siu To Conservatory of Music, imagining his path to the concert hall's spotlights was wide open. But after his mother was diagnosed with severe kidney failure and needed dialysis 3 times a week, he was forced to drop out midway to work and support his family. His younger sister was still small, and later became pregnant unexpectedly, raising her child alone, so the family's burden fell entirely on his shoulders. Thus he chose to come to America, working alternating day and night shifts in this skyscraper in downtown New York, cleaning at night, doing odd construction jobs during the day, just to pay for his mother's expensive medical bills and milk for his nephew. Music for him had long become a luxury. Now his only solace was an old electric piano bought from a second-hand store in an NYC flea market. A few keys were already broken, but he would still put on his headphones and practice in the quiet of the night, letting the melody become his only secret escape, a moment where he could truly be himself. Yet, today, this public declaration was like a stone thrown into the once still pond of his heart. 6 months. Such a challenge was not just a test of musical skill, but a gamble with destiny. He didn't dare to think too much, merely raised his head and looked at Ava Sterling on the stage. In her eyes, there was a familiar arrogance, a loneliness that he felt he too carried within him. Ava was not one to speak lightly. She had been raised to despise insincerity and superficiality above all else. She had witnessed too many people use money to create a veneer of glamour, yet fail to touch a true soul. That statement was a severe test, and at the same time, a formidable barrier. She sought not wealth or power, but a soul that could resonate with her, a rare authenticity. The employee group chat immediately became lively. Messages kept popping up. Seriously? 6 months to play Rach 3? Is she insane? Or should we find a violin prodigy for a crossover? The office atmosphere suddenly ignited with whispers. Everyone was murmuring, but no one realized that the figure bowing his head and mopping the floor was actually the real pivot, the hidden protagonist of this drama. As night descended, the lights in the building dimmed one by one. The daytime hustle and bustle subsided, and the entire building was left with only the low hum of machinery. Kai, as usual, tidied up his cleaning equipment, then ascended to the 40th floor. His heart beat a little faster than usual, an inexplicable sense of anticipation. There, a spacious CEO's office, with towering glass windows, overlooked the sparkling lights of the New York skyline. In the corner, a white grand piano sat silently, waiting. It was the instrument Ava occasionally played while working, but now no one paid attention, no one watched. Kai pushed open the door, stepping in cautiously as if entering a forbidden zone, a place where he didn't belong. He gently lifted the dust cover from the piano, his hands trembling slightly. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, suppressing all emotions. The first chord resonated. The entire room was instantly filled with a grand, powerful, yet melancholic stream of music. It wasn't an improvisation, but a complete opening, a forceful return. He began his solo in the darkness, where only he and the music existed. Time seemed to warp, passing in an unusual way. For 40 minutes, he didn't stop, made no mistakes, not a single off-key note. Every note carried a suppressed power and longing that had long been hidden, as if the entire weight of his life, all his burdens and sacrifices, were compressed into each piano key. Neon lights outside the window flickered, constantly changing colors, but could not overshadow this intense and tragic flow of music. Kai had no idea that everything he did was being fully recorded by the surveillance cameras. In another control room, Ava Sterling had not yet left. She was still engrossed in her work. She switched on the surveillance monitor, initially just for routine building checks, but then she was stunned by the performance. She sat frozen in her chair. On the black and white screen, the cleaner who usually bowed his head and mopped the floor every day was playing one of the world's most difficult pieces with almost flawless precision, flowing like water, graceful and full of emotion. She stared at the screen, her fingers trembling unconsciously, rewinding, listening again and again to every note until the last chord faded away and the room returned to silence. Ava's eyes were slightly red. She suddenly realized that perhaps the true answer she sought had been hidden in the most inconspicuous corner, an unexpected place in this building. Ava sat before the monitor, staring fixedly for a long time, seemingly mesmerized. The black and white surveillance footage wasn't entirely clear, but Kai's hands dancing across the piano keys were like flames burning deep into her eyes. She had once doubted if she had misheard. How could it be? A cleaner could perform the first movement of Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto, No. 3, completely, and almost without fault? She leaned back in her chair, her chest rising and falling erratically, filled with a whirlwind of thoughts. 6 months ago, the challenge she had blurted out was initially just a sarcastic jab at a group of young scions who believed themselves talented because of their money. She wanted to use that declaration to build a high wall, forcing those men, confident in their wealth, to retreat, to recognize their own superficiality. She knew well that anyone who truly understood the weight of this piece would certainly understand that the two words perfect were almost synonymous with impossible. Yet, tonight, she saw someone who was completely off her list, someone entirely unrelated. This stirred an indescribable conflict within her. Should she immediately go out and expose this secret, or quietly observe to see how far he could go? Ava placed her hands on the table, fingers intertwined, her gaze fixed on the final frame on the screen, lost in thought. The next morning, the building returned to its usual hustle and bustle. Bright sunlight streamed through the glass windows, spreading everywhere. Office workers walked around in high heels and leather shoes, their conversations still revolving around last night's entertainment news and the latest stock market trends. No one noticed Kai, who was bent over, wiping a doorknob in the corner. In his eyes, there was a hint of weariness that was difficult to conceal. The 40-minute performance the previous night had nearly drained him of all his energy and emotion. When he returned to his cramped rented apartment, his mother was already asleep, his younger sister in her small room with her baby, surrounded by medicine bottles and milk formula. He could only quietly pour a glass of warm water to moisten his throat, then silently closed his eyes, leaning against the wall. The loneliness of being unappreciated almost swallowed him whole. But deep in his heart, he felt a sense of relief he hadn't experienced in a long time, a rare moment of lightness. For Kai, music was not the glamour of the stage, but the only proof that allowed him to remember that he was still alive, still truly himself. He knew that sneaking into the CEO's office was a serious violation of regulations. If caught, he would not only lose his job, but might even face legal action, and his already difficult life would become even more hopeless. But he couldn't restrain himself. He went up to the 40th floor, again and again, because only there could he touch a real piano. Could he allow his soul to temporarily escape from his mundane life, from the crushing burdens? A few days later, the topic of Ava's 6-month challenge continued to spread rapidly. The internal employee chat group was constantly buzzing with new messages. Some said a renowned pianist had been invited to participate. Others claimed some wealthy young men were spending heavily to hire Russian teachers for private intensive training. Investors even started betting on who was most likely to be the chosen one. For the outside world, this was an entertaining spectacle, an intriguing drama. For Ava, it gradually became a heavy pressure. Some media outlets began to spread rumors, speculating whether there was another motive behind her marriage declaration. Some said she wanted to use this to boost the company's profile. Others claimed she was trying to delay family pressure for marriage. Ava did not comment on these rumors, choosing instead to focus more on her work. However, whenever night fell and silence reigned, she would still open that surveillance video, listening repeatedly. Each time, her heart was struck by the same melody, a profound emotional resonance. This secret vibration made her begin to pay more attention to Kai. During the day, she would look down from her office's glass window, occasionally spotting him, bending over to mop the floor or dispose of trash. That figure seemed completely unrelated to the artist on the screen. She even wondered if she was dreaming, if her imagination had transformed a cleaner into a talented artist. Kai, however, was unaware that he was being watched by an unseen gaze. He continued to live his day-to-day life, diligently and laboriously. After his night shift ended in the morning, he would rush to a construction site to move cement. In the afternoon, he would return home to care for his mother and nephew. In the evening, he would take a short nap before hurrying back to the skyscraper. This cycle had continued for many years, a relentless life. The only difference was that at night, when he ascended to the 40th floor, the flame within him was no longer suppressed but flickered softly. Sometimes he would place his phone beside the piano, recording snippets of his playing. That was the only evidence he could leave for the future. He knew he had no audience, no one to show his talent to, but he still wanted to tell himself, "I tried." In the recordings, some parts still had errors, so he would play them over and over until his fingers were hot and aching, only then reluctantly closing the piano lid. This persistence stood in stark contrast to the superficiality outside. Downstairs, in the luxurious cafe, a group of young elites were laughing and chatting merrily, discussing which teacher was the most expensive, which piano brand best showcased their status. They laughed and said that Rage 3 was difficult, yes, but with money, nothing was impossible. These words reached Kai's ears, but they felt like a sharp needle piercing his heart. He knew well that he had no resources, no time, and his hands were even rough from years of arduous labor. But precisely because of this, he understood even more that only through complete dedication and absolute perseverance would he not completely disappear in this harsh world. One night, when he once again pushed open the door to the CEO's office, he was surprised to find the piano lid already open. The piano sat there calmly, as if waiting for him, a mysterious welcome. He stood frozen in place, his heart beating faster than usual. Who had touched this? Could someone have found out? He didn't dare to think much further, but still sat down. As the first note sounded, the corner of his eye seemed to catch a glimpse of a shadow outside the crack in the door. But he told himself it was just an illusion, a trick of his mind. So, once again, he poured his entire being into the black and white keys. Kai sat at the piano, his heart pounding, a rapid rhythm in his chest. He knew he was taking a huge risk, perhaps losing everything, yet he allowed the music to flow incessantly. The room that night was strangely silent, eerily still, as if the entire building held its breath, with only him and the piano conversing, a dialogue between soul and music. However, he couldn't ignore the faint shadow outside the door crack, a feeling of being watched constantly haunting him, until the last chord ended. He slowly lifted his head, but only saw an empty hallway. The light flickered once, as if the night was playing tricks, toying with his senses. He suppressed the doubts in his heart, closed the piano lid, gently wiped the sweat from his forehead, and returned to the quiet, unnoticed figure of a cleaner. The next morning, the office was bustling as usual. Beside the automatic coffee machine, two female employees whispered, I heard Chairman Thorne's son is bringing in a Russian maestro to New York for 6 months of private training, all for that Rach 3 challenge. Isn't that just a disguised display of wealth? The other chuckled. Anyway, if he can really play it, Ava Sterling will actually have to marry him. The topic quickly spread through the pantry, meeting rooms, and even external news. For white-collar workers and the media, this was no longer a simple music test, but a dramatic reality show in the business world, a staged entertainment. But Ava herself couldn't smile. Ava Sterling sat in her high-rise office, looking at the contract documents on her desk, but in her mind, that surveillance footage kept replaying. It wasn't mere technique, but a performance bearing the weight of life, of experience. Every note seemed carved from flesh and blood, from sweat and tears, compelling her to admit that that was true perfection, a perfection stemming from the soul. She wrestled with herself internally. Reason told her she shouldn't interfere, because once publicized, it would ignite a fierce wave of public opinion, impacting the company's reputation. But emotion was like an invisible flood, washing away her firm defenses, shaking the principles she had always upheld. And at the other end of the building, Kai continued to live his day-to-day life, still diligent with his work. He still rushed between construction sites and night shifts, still quietly comforted his mother by her sickbed, still prepared milk for his nephew amidst cries. He often dozed off on the bus, his hand still clutching a worn-out, ancient music score. That score had been flipped through countless times, the pencil marks on it like dense scars, recording so much effort. Once, he accidentally opened it in the break room. Mr. Henderson, the security supervisor next to him, glanced at it and couldn't help but ask, "Kai, what's that?" "Just old stuff, sir." Kai closed the score and replied softly, "Mr." Henderson didn't ask further, but he inwardly noted that this young man seemed to hide a world unknown to anyone, a deep secret. Days passed, and the deadline for the challenge drew nearer. External attention grew more intense. Some music critics even publicly declared on TV that Rach 3 was the Everest of piano, utterly unplayable unless by a professional performer. Audiences discussed it fervently. Some treated it as a joke, others genuinely hoped to witness a miracle. Kai still secretly practiced piano at night. Each time the piano's sound flowed, he felt himself drawing a little closer to that distant, unreachable peak, closer to his dream. He dared not imagine the outcome, only telling himself that even without an audience, he had to complete his own climb. He had to prove his worth. One night, when he once again pushed open the door to the CEO's office, he was surprised to find a bottle of unopened mineral water on the table. Beside it was a blank piece of paper. On the paper, there was only one sentence: "Keep playing." Short, succinct, but with no recognizable handwriting. Kai stood frozen in place, a complex mix of emotions welling up within him. Someone knew what he was doing, and not only didn't stop him, but even encouraged him. This secret support was like a small flame, igniting the long-buried belief within him, giving him strength. He clenched his fist, deciding not just to practice in secret anymore, but to pour all his energy into it, turning every night into his final performance, a unique opportunity. However, fate did not allow him a smooth journey. A few days later, the company announced it would hold an employee talent night, inviting all staff to sign up. As soon as the news broke, the entire building buzzed with excitement. Everyone whispered, saying this was probably the CEO's idea, used to select potential challengers for the big competition. "Mr." Henderson quietly approached Kai, patting his shoulder. "Kai, why don't you give it a try? It's just for fun, no one will laugh at you." Kai froze. He wrestled with himself. Participating meant bringing his secret into the light. Not participating meant remaining a nameless shadow, living in silence forever. That night, he murmured to himself in the mirror, "If I don't step out, I'll forever just be a cleaner, never fulfilling my dream." The announcement for the talent night was posted at every elevator door on every floor, and also pinned in the internal group chat. The headline read, "Come and discover the you don't know," accompanied by a beautifully designed and inspiring poster. In the center of the poster were a golden piano and a microphone, symbolizing performance and freedom of expression. For most people, this was just a light-hearted leisure activity, a relaxing event after work. Colleagues from the finance department would perform ukulele duets. The design department planned a shadow puppet show. Some even said they'd wear Kumamon costumes to dance. The atmosphere was cheerful and lively, yet it also subtly highlighted an invisible boundary of social class. Kai stared at the registration form for a long time, an intense internal struggle brewing. He paced back and forth in front of the front desk, the pen twirling in his hand, hesitating. Mr. Henderson next to him advised, Kai, you don't actually have to play for everyone. Just participate. Show your face a bit. Let everyone know you're not just a cleaner. But Kai understood in his heart that if he went on stage, he couldn't just show his face. If he chose the piano, his past would be laid bare for everyone to see. Every sacrifice would be made public. But if he retreated, the piano sound that night in the CEO's office would forever remain a whispered secret no one knew, a secret forever buried. In the end, he filled out the registration form, writing only one simple yet profound line. Piano performance. Self-selected piece. As soon as the registration information was announced, the employee forum immediately exploded with comments. Did you guys see that the cleaner signed up too? Really? He's going to play piano? Dying of laughter. Wonder if he's going to be funny? He's probably playing the Majula Singapura version on an electric piano. Will he wear his uniform on stage? Hope he doesn't scare the VIPs, haha. For those accustomed to each other's glamorous appearances, Kai's presence was a ludicrous anomaly, an awkward absurdity. They had never considered him an equal. No one truly believed in his talent. The talent night took place that evening. The company had transformed the main lobby into a magnificent small stage. Bright stage lights, a plush red carpet, and seating areas were meticulously arranged like a miniature theater. Below, employees and senior management filled every seat, and even several key partners and reporters were invited. Ava Sterling sat in the front row, calmly observing the event, her emotions unreadable. Outwardly, she appeared relaxed, but inwardly, her mind was racing with complex thoughts and calculations. She had deliberately not removed Kai's name from the registration list, nor had she specifically informed anyone. She was waiting to see if the piano sound that had moved her that night would dare to step onto this brilliant and pressure-filled stage. The first act was a ukulele duet from the finance department, cheerful and light-hearted. This was followed by an energetic dance performance from the administration department. The audience laughed continuously. Applause resonated, creating a lively atmosphere. The mood gradually warmed up, but also subtly contained a touch of superficiality and pretense. After all, this was not a professional concert hall, but an entertainment party that had been prearranged, a part of corporate culture. When Kai was about to go on stage, the MC deliberately raised his voice. Next up is Mr. Kai Lim, our night shift cleaning colleague. He will be performing a piano piece. Below the stage, a burst of laughter erupted along with gasps of surprise. No one dared to believe it. Some started taking photos. Some even pulled out their phones to live stream. Rare to see something like this. Record it quickly. Kai wore his faded blue uniform, his hands visibly rough and calloused from hard work, yet his back was straighter than any tailored suit, full of pride. He slowly walked to the piano. The stage lights shone on him, causing him to squint slightly. He took a deep breath, suppressing all emotions, then turned to face the audience. In that moment, all the murmurs seemed to halt. The entire hall fell silent. He gently sat down, opened the piano lid, and placed his fingers on the keys. No one knew what he would play, nor did anyone truly expect anything. Most people just awaited his flub, hoping for a laugh. But when the first chord sounded, the entire hall fell silent for a brief moment. It wasn't a famous Singaporean folk song, nor any comical tune, but precisely the opening melody of Rachmaninoff Piano Concerto No. 3. The bass notes were deep and grand, like an underground current, flowing from the depths of the heart, shaking the soul. Kai's fingers glided across the keys without hesitation, without trembling. His eyes were focused like fire, his entire being seemed to merge with the music, becoming one with it. Initially, the audience was still whispering, "Isn't this a very difficult concerto? Is he really playing it? It's not a recording, is it?" But a few dozen seconds later, the mocking laughter gradually quieted down, replaced by astonishment. The melody began to soar, like emotions breaking through the darkness, approaching the light of dawn. The entire hall was left with only the music and an indescribable tremor, a feeling that touched the soul. Ava Sterling sat upright, her pupils slightly dilated. It wasn't an illusion. That was precisely the music she had heard on the surveillance footage that night. The piano music was played with his very life, with his entire being. Mr. Henderson, below the stage, watched wide-eyed, his mouth agape. He had always thought Kai only knew a little about music, never expecting him to reach such a level, a hidden talent. In the back rows, someone quietly put away their phone, no longer live streaming, but instead quietly watched the stage, as if afraid to miss a single note, afraid to break the sacred moment. And just as the piece entered its transformative middle section, in a corner of the hall, a cold gaze fixed on Kai. It was Julian Thorne, a long-standing partner of Ava, and also the most highly touted rival in this challenge. He had originally prepared to complete a perfect performance next week for private coaching. Unexpectedly, today he was caught off guard by a cleaner, outmaneuvered in an unforeseen way. His face darkened, the wine glass in his hand clenched tightly, almost shattering. When the last note slowly faded into the air of the main hall, the entire space fell into a deathly silence. No one applauded, no one stood up, even the blue light from phone screens halted. It was as if everyone had simultaneously been struck by something, their souls momentarily lost, completely immersed in the music. Kai slowly withdrew his hands. As he stood up, he trembled slightly, a release after much suppression. He bowed gently to the audience, then turned and walked off the stage. His steps were unsteady, but there was a subtle tremor, a silent pride. He didn't know what he had done right, only knew that in that moment, he had no regrets. He had lived fully. A faint applause came from an unfamiliar young engineer in the back row, as if waking from a stunned state, suddenly clapping. Then a second, a third clap, slowly converging into a thunderous, surging applause that filled the entire hall. Some stood up, some had teary eyes from emotion, and some remained silent, too overwhelmed. It wasn't about winning or losing, but about a certain emotion that was finally touched, a deep empathy. Backstage, Ava Sterling stood before the surveillance monitor, her eyes slightly red. She remembered the feeling when she first heard a street performer in New York that year. She remembered the humiliation in her youth when she secretly attended music classes but was asked to leave the room due to her background. She remembered when she first uttered the words, "Whoever can play it perfectly in 6 months, I will marry him." It wasn't just a challenge to others, but truly a mockery of her own despair for love, a desperate play. But tonight, those memories and beliefs were torn apart and rebuilt, filled with a new emotion. The MC slowly walked onto the stage. "Now we will announce the scoring results." The large screen began to light up, and the anonymous judges' scores were displayed one by one. Out of 5 professional judges, 3 had given Kai Lim higher scores, while 2 had given them to Julian Thorne. A gasp of surprise erupted from the audience, an unexpected result. Next were the audience voting results. The numbers climbed steadily. Julian Thorne 1.12 million votes, Kai Lim 1.67 million votes. The MC's voice deepened, clear. "The winner of this piano showdown is Kai Lim." The entire hall erupted in applause, cheers, and incredulous shouts, overflowing with emotion. Phone platforms crashed instantly. Comments on the live stream surpassed hundreds of thousands. "We witnessed history. He's not a miracle, he's proof. This isn't about marriage, but about dignity." And Kai stood in the center of the stage, his face devoid of excessive joy from victory, only a profound astonishment, a bewildered feeling. He looked out at the audience, searching for something. Somewhere, Ava Sterling stood up, slowly walking towards him. Everyone held their breath, waiting. Would she fulfill her marriage promise? Would she walk onto the stage, take his hand? Would she let this modern fairy tale truly conclude with a marriage contract? But she did not. She walked to the edge of the stage, whispered a sentence to him, then turned and walked towards backstage, leaving him alone standing in the bright spotlight. She said, "The person you are now doesn't need me to complete you." The applause had not stopped. The story was not yet over. 3 days after the competition ended, the intensity of the news had already shifted to a new political scandal. On social media, too, a new entertainment topic had captured attention, leaving the previous event behind. But in some hidden corners, that competition still lingered like an unextinguished echo, softly burning in people's hearts, a small flame. The competition video clip, once played on the subway station's digital billboards, was now being abused in critical articles and gradually sinking to the bottom layers of social media pages, no longer frequently mentioned. But some people started playing his version on the streets. Some adopted the improvisational passage he played that night as an informal piece to teach children an invisible legacy. Kai Lim's piano playing that night became an existence that could not be explicitly spoken, but would be remembered forever in the deepest part of people's hearts. It did not disappear, it merely transformed into the rhythm of your walk, the hum of your cooking, the gentleness you can still hear when you grow old. The day after the competition, he did not accept media invitations or advertising offers. He declined all engagements, returning to his daily life, caring for his mother by day, teaching children piano at a community music center in the evenings. He also occasionally walked past the building where he once worked, looking at the CEO's office, which was now always lit. He was no longer a cleaner, nor had he become a celebrity. He was simply Kai Lim, a man who won a competition but took nothing from anyone, a man who could finally play piano freely, living his passion. One afternoon, he walked into an old bookstore on a street corner. The proprietress was flipping through a newspaper. Seeing him enter, she looked up and said, "Young man, why do you look like that fellow from the competition?" He smiled. "Perhaps I just wander the streets a lot." The proprietress didn't ask further, only saying, "Young man, remember that when you win, you must also remember when you lose to others." And Julian Thorne? After the competition, he briefly disappeared from the media. Rumors circulated that he would immigrate to Canada. Others said he had been frozen out by his family's company. But half a month later, he appeared at a charity concert, playing for underprivileged children in New York. Someone asked him, "Will you compete again?" He merely replied, "I've learned one thing. Some pieces are for confronting others, some pieces are for making peace with oneself." And Ava Sterling, the day after the competition ended, also did not appear at the headquarters as expected. She had submitted a request to the board for a 6-month leave, stating she needed to return to New York for a while. At the airport, she carried only a small suitcase. Michelle, her assistant, asked her, "Will you come back?" She turned and smiled. "I'm just going to see why I became this way." Time flew by. 3 months later, in a corner of the community music classroom, an old, well-used piano stood. Its keys were slightly yellowed with age, and a few children surrounded it, laughing joyfully. Some played haphazardly, others practiced precise notes. Kai Lim sat behind them, no longer the protagonist in the center of the stage, but a quiet guardian of the sound's order, an inspirer. He held a handwritten music score, diligently noting the children's mistakes and progress. Suddenly, a little girl asked him, "Teacher, wasn't the man in the video a winner? Why didn't he become a star?" He looked down and smiled, stroking her head. "Because I prefer this kind of sound. It's gentler than the stage lights." That evening, he walked to the small plaza next to the neighborhood as usual. A blind old gentleman was playing an old song. The piano sound was slow but heartfelt, full of emotion. Kai squatted down, helping to adjust the height of the piano stand for him. The old gentleman stopped and said, "You play piano, don't you?" "Yes," he replied. "To what extent?" He thought for a moment and said, "To the extent that I can live without applause." Not long after, the city library organized an exhibition titled Anonymous Musicians, inviting artists from all walks of life to share their experiences of finding music in the crevices of life. In a corner, there was a photo of Kai's back as he sat at the piano on the night of the competition. There was no name, no introduction, only one sentence printed below. "If you play piano to be loved, then one day you will realize that perhaps love has already been in your fingertips." The story had no wedding, no champion's crown, no continuation of a legend, only the accumulation of ordinary things, genuine emotions. But once certain sounds have resonated, they will forever dwell in the deepest parts of people's hearts. It does not disappear. It merely transforms into the rhythm of your walk, the hum of your cooking, the gentleness you can still hear when you grow old. This is Kai Lim's story. Not a miracle from a cleaner to a piano prince, but a quiet transformation from playing piano to escape to playing piano to exist authentically. It's not that the world listens to you when you conquer it. It's that when you finally learn to quietly play for yourself, the world quiets down to listen with you. This story isn't meant to illustrate that effort leads to success, or that those from humble backgrounds can turn their lives around. It quietly tells us that the dignity of some people doesn't need validation through victory, but through their choice not to abandon themselves. Some sounds are never meant to be heard, but to prevent oneself from falling silent. In an era where rhythm accelerates and outcomes become clearer, if you are still willing to pause and quietly listen to an imperfect but honest piano sound, then, within your heart, you still hold something the world cannot take away. Perhaps you too have walked a path in life, like Kai Lim, unseen, uncredited, yet still pursuing that unapplauded endeavor. May, after hearing this story, you feel more steadfast in believing that you don't need to be chosen by anyone, as long as you choose not to forget yourself. If this story has moved you or made you reflect, please leave a comment to share what you've gleaned from it, and please help us by liking and sharing it, so more people can hear this quiet and profound sound. This is not just a story about piano, but also about how you and I are learning to live.